na 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 na. Baby, I'm the real thing. Baby, I'm the real thing. Baby, I'm the real thing.
Good afternoon, participants. And we are now at the final session of this annual banking conclave. So feel free to, collect as many points as you would like to win the leaderboard prizes. So this is your last chance to do that. The topic of the next session is inter-office accounts in banking industry, which cannot be undermined at all. And we have with us a very seasoned professional in this topic, Mr. Rahul Zaveri from Protiviti India. Rahul is a director in the financial services risk advisory practice of Protiviti India. He is a chartered accountant and a GAP certified FRM. He has more than 15 years of experience in all three lines of defense across various financial services industry, including banks, payment systems, broker dealers, investment banks, and stock exchanges. He has worked with clients across USA, Europe, Middle East, and India. And in his last stint, he has worked with Kotak Mahindra Bank as a chief manager in the group internal audit function. Rahul has led number of risk management projects across credit risk, market risk, operational risk, outsourcing risk, product risk, liquidity risk, and also fraud risk and ERM engagements. He has also been working on internal audit engagements, including office accounts, uh, data quality audits, audit transformation, development of risk-based internal audit plans, quality assurance reviews, control reviews, and concurrent audit projects. He has done various compliance and other consulting or advisory related work, including credit due diligence, process due diligence, compliance readiness assessments, benchmarking with global standards, BPR, development of operations, risk management, compliance, and support functions. So please welcome Rahul Zaveri. Thank you. Over to you, Rahul.
Thank you, Percy. Thanks a lot. Good evening, everyone. Hope you all are safe. Last day, last session. Let me just share my screen. Percy, I hope the screen is visible.
Yes, Rahul, the screen is visible.
Perfect. Thank you. Actually, I had just 4 slides, so I thought of introducing table of contents slide to make it 5. Well, I'm sorry. So on a lighter note, I know, a question is going to pop up during the session that how many office accounts or how many accounts is generally a bank should have? What should be the ideal range of those number of office accounts? And let me tell you, it's the whatever projects I have done in the past with the banks and all the audit committees, the first question is this. And throughout the session, I'll try and highlight the significance of the question and at the same time share my perspective on why this particular question is difficult to answer. There are no specific point blank answers to this question. Well, before I go in detailed presentation, I just would like to first express my love towards this banking and financial services industry. Well, if we look at it, do we manufacture? Do we construct something like a manufacturer, or do we grow something like a farmer? Well, the answer is obviously no. Do we, in terms of is there anything tangible stuff which we really produce? Again, answer is no. If you really look at stock markets as well, I mean, if the security is unlisted, you will value the security basis the considering the present value of all the future cash flows, right? In the stock market, one particular individual will believe that this particular stock needs to be, can give me a more better return in future as compared to the what current price is, and he would go and then buy that security. Uh, Again, is there a real contribution to GDP? Is there a real tangible thing getting added in the economy? Yeah, well, answer is no. Am I saying negative things about the industry? No. Let me change the track. Well, if a particular company wants to raise public money, where it will go? It cannot go in the market. It cannot go on the road and just say that, hey, I am raising public money. Do you want to place your money with me? Obviously, that's not the way it will work. It will go to a stock exchange. The people of India would trust and believe in the stock exchange environment. Obviously, there are risks when you are investing any money. But at least you'll believe that there is a structure to this whole process, right? So that's what a banking and financial services industry brings to the table. Somebody, I think today in the one of the speaker did mention that what is banking business all about? Banking business is at a very high level. If someone has to say that it collects money from the customer and it gives loan to the customer at the end of the day, right? So where an individual would be able to save its hard-earned own money? I answer is bank, right? If an individual wants a short-term loan or a medium-term loan, where it would go? It would come to the bank. So that's the significance of the banking and financial services industry, if I have to put it across. Now let me connect to the today's topic. Let's imagine the balance sheet of a bank, right? Now, just one second. Yeah, let's imagine the balance sheet of the bank. At a very high level, if you look at it, there would be on the liability side, deposits accounts, capital account, and on the asset side, loans and investments. Now imagine the chart of accounts, and I'll try and highlight the gravity of this topic. Let's add the branch flavor to the this entire structure of the balance sheet. It blows up, right? Suddenly it sounds like, oh, there are so many accounts. Now let's add types of products: current account, saving account, term deposits. Within the current account, there is a OD account. In the saving account, there is a employee account. There is a senior citizenship account. Why all this? And again, each type of this account means each type of a different product structure it needs. Each different type of an office account it would need. Now, why this segregation is required? Logical. In the banking system, nobody is going to calculate the interest, right? And it's going to get automatically calculated and posted in the customer's account. Now, if you do not distinguish between a normal account, employee account, and a senior citizenship account, then obviously you will not be able to direct the system in terms of from where to calculate the interest. So that's why there is a segregation. Current account, OD account. Why do we need a separate OD tagging or this thing? Because if a particular check is coming and if I clear that particular check as a bank and the money is going in a negative balance in a current account, if the OD account facility is not active, I will not clear the check. If it is available, then I will clear the check. So hence the need of this segregation of accounts and hence the higher number of accounts as well. Let's add further complexity. RTGS, IMPS, right? Let's say Percy receives money from, I transfer some money to Percy from another bank account. Percy's bank account is going to get credit in their RBI account from my bank. And from there, the treasury team of that bank would take that money and post it in their ledger or in their account. From there, it will go to the branch where Percy's account is there, maybe in a sundry liability funds in transit, SLFIT, or some of the other account. I mean, I'll use these terminologies throughout the session to make it more clearer, but I'm just trying to show the flow and tell you all saying that why so many accounts and the gravity of this entire office account concept, right? So from the RBI current account to treasury to branch, and branch finally to Percy's account. So these many accounts are required again. Let's add treasury transaction, trade finance transaction, LC, BG, correct? I mean, again, complexity got added. Income, types of income, I mean, processing fee, interest fee, check bounce fee, late payment charges. Again, for each branch, each type of product, we need these many accounts. So it's just a multiplication which keeps on happening. Expenses and all, right? Now, if I have to really finally throw one bullet to, really show the picture of the gravity, I mean, let's add the currency as a last complexity. Bank, you transact in AED, USD, CAD, all those things, right? So at the end of the day, again, for each type of currency, you will need a different type of account. So this is how I want to set the context for the subject. Now, before we go much deeper in the subject, I think I just have 4 slides, as I said. I would set the context. There is a RBI circular in 2019 July, which banks are supposed to comply with. First 2 slides are almost a replication or a summary which I have taken from the RBI circular. The third slide, elements of office account, would give you a broader summary of this entire concept, and finally we will touch the audit approach. Now with this, again, this is from RBI circular. This would help us understand the so-called as why this particular topic is so much of an interest. And again, these are all incidents which RBI noted during their inspections, and which they have put it across in their circular, and gave us synopsis of those fraudulent or maybe audit observations which they noted during their inspection. So a large cash deposit of customer accounts are routed through internal office account. I mean, small entries would be passed in those internal office accounts in order to avoid the cumulative transaction of 10 lakhs, which just earlier speaker explained us. P&L accounts, generally it should be system accounts. I mean, nobody should be able to touch it, but you have to give certain rights to waive off particular charges from the customer. So again, there has to be proper authority has to be defined and all of that, to make sure that you are not this particular facility is not abused, because this can lead to the revenue leakages, which is what one of the other noting which RBI had. And this is the third one is slightly interesting. I think this depends on what types of banking system a particular banking is using. In terms of, let's say, there are several internal office accounts which are tagged as a general liability accounts, and what happens is the credit balance of this account gets netted off against the debit balance of that particular account, which would which will facilitate, I mean, in some sense, if I have to use the word, which will ensure that the aging doesn't come up. I mean, if there is a long-standing aging for a debit balance, then that will get, I mean, it will not appear at all, because it has been netted off against the credit balance. So this was another finding which RBI had. Opening of a new loan account for an existing borrower. So what a particular individual can do is will disburse a fresh loan, and from that money they will transfer to the old account, so as to make sure the NPA doesn't get reflected or identified in the system. Another interesting one, creating a dummy entry. I mean, a lot of times the rules for identification of NPA would be there is no single entry on the credit side of the particular borrower for 90 days. Then it would pick up and highlight it as, this is a potential account where whether we need to classify as a NPA or go to the next steps needs to get triggered. It will get triggered. So what RBI finding was saying that there was a manual posting of an entry for a zero value on the credit side of the borrower account, so that the system doesn't pick up. So these some of the findings were there. And if you really look at it, let's look at it from a high level for the fraud perspective. I mean, let's look at, let's say you are sanctioning a loan to a particular individual who is not authorized or who is not capable to get sanctioned of that value of a loan. That will not hit the office account, agreed. But majority of the other frauds, at the end of the day, it has to hit books of account, correct? Then only, let's say that SWIFT related fraud, which got, which was identified in early this thing. Again, it had an impact on an office account. So at the end of the day, fraud has to hit the books of accounts, and it will get routed through one or the other office account. except one or two cases which I just mentioned. Let's say you are facilitating one particular broker for doing your treasury transactions. And obviously, for that you may not, office account may not be that sort of a tool to drive that fraud. It is more outside the books, because if in any case, if you had to pay a brokerage or a commission to a broker, you would have used office account, even if it was a genuine transaction, correct? So in case of such a fraudulent transaction as well, where you are facilitating a particular broker, there is no direct usage of office account. But other than this one or two which I just mentioned, office account will be somewhere or the other be involved while executing a particular fraud transaction, which is what I just wanted to highlight from this slide. Okay, so quickly moving on, and what I'll do is across this next three slides, I'll take up each of the topic, and I'll try and go much deeper. I'll build over it through as we go through the slide. So this is primarily the requirement from the RBI. These are 9 elements or 9 categories which we could analyze from the RBI circular, what they had specific requirements to. First is obviously the governance. Top management is responsible for designing and implement the overall office account framework. There has to be defined and approved policy and procedures for the complete office account lifecycle. Now, when I say office account lifecycle, would mean opening of an account, modification in that account, either in their attributes or etc., posting of entries in those accounts, in terms of monitoring those particular account for transaction monitoring or balance monitoring, and finally, obviously, provisions and closing of those office accounts. So this is the whole life cycle of the office account. And for each of these elements, you got to have policies and procedures, is what the expectation from RBI is. Account opening. You will not keep on opening an account when a new branch gets in place, right? So you will have a replication. So you will have certain predefined accounts which will get replicated. And there'll be a separate, those many accounts will get open to a new branch. So that's called master replication process. At times you go to open specific account as well, like classic case was GST. When it got introduced, all the banks had to open the GST accounts, and that account got created, and then it got mapped to all the branches everywhere. When I'm using the word branches, we also need to keep in mind the departments. Treasury department would have their own set of accounts. Trade finance would have their own. Clearing department would have their own. So the intent of the word branch is not the only branches, but larger departments is what I try to say. So opening of a specific account, which I just mentioned, and RBI circular clearly talks saying that there has to be an approving authority, which is GM and above, while approving opening of any new account. That's the mandate from the RBI. Account needs to be linked with the relevant GL and PL. I think this primarily came with one of the fraud which I highlighted in the earlier slide, just to ensure that there is no setting off of the balances between the within the accounts. So that's the primary reason, because you can have sundry asset and sundry liability, right? So you'll just open one account and all the entries will get mixed. Then it doesn't help. Let me try and share one more point of view here. At the end of the day, again, I'm going back to that. What is a bank's business, right? At the end of the day, all the money which is lying there, it is ultimately customers' money. Let's say you receive a subsidy from RBI for your agri loan, home loan, or whatever it is, affordable housing loan. You will park that particular money in a particular account, and then you will start allocating for all the customers who are eligible. If you are unable to identify a particular customer, you will have to park that money in some of the other account, right? You're not able to trace him, or his account is freeze for a timing, then you cannot post that entry. So you will hold that balance in some of the other account. Now, hence it is very much important for bank to identify that which customer this money belongs to. And that's the key requirement. Otherwise, again, it goes back to that trust thing what we were discussing few sessions before. Having said that, so the GL justification, which will come as another topic, is the most important element in this entire office account piece. Okay, continuing, and hence that netting off cannot be allowed, right? Because on the one side, you have received money from the RBI and you need to distribute it to your customers. On the other side, on the sundry asset, let's say you are supposed to recover money from some other customer. You cannot just offset. I mean, these are two different customers. So hence, offsetting is obviously a no. Account attributes and system controls. There are certain accounts which are system accounts. I mean, you will income accounts, for example, as I was just mentioning earlier, the processing fees, the late payment charges, check bounce charges, etc. The moment that particular event triggers, it will automatically post the entries. There cannot be a manual entry like, since somebody has taken a loan, so you will pass a manual entry saying that disbursement amount this much, processing fee this much. I mean, it doesn't work like that. You will just book a transaction. In all the banking systems, core banking application system, there would be always menus and the MOP IDs from where you need to book that particular transaction. And we'll touch upon this topic on the next slides as well. But just to give a perspective to that, let's take an example of cash deposit. Whenever a customer goes and deposits cash, teller is not sitting there and making an entry saying, hey, cash account debit to Percy account. No, that doesn't happen. That cannot happen. He has to do many other checks in terms of checking the currency, whether identifying the person is genuine or not. There are too many other things. 49,000 above, then you have to collect PAN card and all of that. So he's focused on that. He just needs to, in a particular menu, and depends on the system. Primarily, there are three core banking system in India which is used. One is Finacle, FlexCube, and TCS Banks. So in all this system, there will be some or the other menu. It might be called in different names, and he has to enter there the bank account number, the denomination of the currencies. I mean, 50 rupees how many, 100 rupees how many, 500 rupees how many, and then he just has to save the transaction. It will go for a maker checker, and automatically system would post an entry at the backend, which will give credit to the customer's account and increase the cash balance. So yeah, so I was on the topic of system account. Now there are certain accounts where if you book a transaction, as we discussed, let's say LCBG or anything, the processing fees would automatically get calculated and levied. There is no need of a manual entry which is required in those accounts because it again increases the risk. As we saw in the earlier slide, the revenue leakage, if you are keeping your income accounts as a manual account, then there is obviously a risk of somebody entering a particular entry in that account. So that's why this system account functionality is very critical. Intersole accounts. Okay, let's understand branch. At the end of the day, there is a trial balance which gets consolidated at a bank level, but there is obviously a branch level trial balance and branch level P&L also exist, correct? Because you got to monitor the branch profitability, branch progress, etc. Now, if you have to tally the, and again, using our basic accounting concepts, you have to tally the branch trial balance as well, right? In my earlier example, I just touched upon that treasury will transfer the fund to the branch where customer's account is there. In that situation, when the entry cannot be that from treasury's fund account, it goes to branch fund account. From treasury fund account, intersole account of treasury gets credited. And when it is going to the branch, again, branch intersole account is getting debited and branch SLFIT fund account is receiving the money. And hence, if you understand, these are two entries. Obviously, you can knock off and come up with one debit and credit, but there are two different entries to make sure that the trial balance for each of the branch we are able to generate, correct? And it increases the trail also. There's a clear audit trail available when the transaction gets routed in this particular manner. Now, I was on the topic of intersole. So there are certain accounts, let's say this SLFIT account of the branch where the funds finally got parked by the treasury was an open account, which means it was an intersole enabled account, which means the treasury could post an entry in the branch SLFIT account. But other accounts, let's say excess cash or a short cash of that particular branch, only can be operated by the branch people. There is no need of anyone else entering entry or posting any entry in those accounts. So that's why this intersole enable feature comes into play, which will which will secure or which will restrict posting of transactions by someone else other than that branch. I mean, again, it increases the security features and it ensures that we are able to timely address any undue things which is coming in the system or any fraudulent things coming in the system. Pointing and non-pointing, again, I'll take a few minutes to quickly explain what this feature is. And I will connect it with account operation. Let me first hit on the account operation. Account to be used for the purpose defined. This is again called out in the RBI circular, and accounts to be operated only by the authorized employees. When we say the purpose defined, there are always general purpose and specific purpose account. Now, let's say if I have a sundry asset others account, I mean, it is general. I mean, I can use it either for buying stamps or my any other purposes. But ideal way of managing could be that you open a very specific purpose account, but there has to be trade-off. I mean, if you start opening for a very small requirements of the branch, open an account, then obviously your number of accounts will go up. So let's take an example of a specific purpose, SA stamp account. So this account would be used to purchase stamps, because obviously when I'm sanctioning loans and all of that, I have to execute certain papers. So I'll buy stamps and I have to have those stamp papers in the branch, because at the time when the customer is coming, I'm not going to go to the market and buy the stamp and then execute the papers, right? So I have already purchased stamps. So when I'm purchasing the stamp for the first time, the entry would come obviously, which is SA stamps to my cash account. My cash goes out and I buy stamps. Now when a particular customer, I bought for 1,000 rupees, a particular customer comes and I sanction a loan and I require a stamp worth rupees 100. Then obviously I got to recover those money from that customer. So I will transfer the 100 rupees from the stamp account and I'll recover it from the customer account, correct? So this is very specific purpose account. Now I will talk about pointing nature. So when I purchase the 1,000 rupees stamp, and then when I'm reversing 100 rupees, I will link. I mean, if the generally SA stamp account does not require to be a pointing account, but okay, let's take an example of short cash or an excess cash. At the end of the day, when branch was closing, I had 100 rupees of short cash as a tailor. So I had to book it. So the entry would be short cash. So I'll have to increase. I mean, my physical cash is short as compared to the book cash. So I have to decrease my book cash. So I'll post an entry of short cash account debit to cash. Now this came on, let's say, 4th day of a month of January. Again, on 5th day, I had another 200 rupees short cash. So same entry would get posted on 4th and 5th as well. And 6th, I had 500 rupees excess cash. So I'll post a reverse entry. I'll have to inflate the cash account of the book. So cash account debit to excess cash account. Now these 3 entries, first of all, again, as I said earlier, I cannot just offset like that. I need to understand which customer this particular transaction was. So I figure out that 200 rupees on the 5th day, there were 2 customers, one customer with 150 short cash and one customer with 50 rupees short cash. So when I'm reversing that 200 rupees, so I already had a balance of 100 and plus 200, 300 is the balance as of now. I am reversing 150 and 50, but I will pick up an entry of 5th and then I reverse, which means on 5th day, I had a 200 short cash and I'm reversing with the 2 customers account and I'm transferring that short cash to those 2 customers because they gave me a little less money when they were depositing the cash to me. Now, why again this is required? Let's say on 4th, Mr. A was a teller and then 5th, Mr. B was a teller. So now B's responsibility is over from the short cash perspective, but A is yet to find out why there was a short cash and who was that particular customer. And I'm sure all of us know the tailor's problem as well. If they are unable to identify the customer, it hits their salary account as well, right? They have to compensate it from their salary at the end of the day. So that's why the bifurcation and identification from which particular entry you are reversing, which is the pointing feature, is important. Okay, quickly moving on, transaction monitoring. There are certain accounts which you can, centralized monitoring is required. So in a particular transaction, let's say, again, taking an example of SA stamp, you will not have an entry of 1 lakh suddenly, right? You will have a 5,000, 10,000, 20. Of course, it depends on the nature of the branch as well. If it's an urban branch or a metro branch, then the higher could be the amount. But in a small rural branch, there may not be this much of an amount. So if there is a posting of this much of an amount, an alert would get triggered to the centralized team, and they would just speak to the branch people and understand whether this entry is genuine or was there a mistake in posting this entry. So that's the broad at a high level, if I have to speak from the centralized transaction monitoring perspective. The intention of this whole process is to make sure that unauthorized transactions are not getting posted in SASL accounts. As I said, a couple of examples, large cash deposits which are done in tranches across various office accounts to avoid the breach of 10 lakh limit, evergreening of borrower's account by posting these entries. So that's where the transaction monitoring really helps. Balance monitoring, another very important aspect. There are certain accounts which got to be zeroized. Let's say again, let's take another example of sundry asset central processing unit account for opening saving accounts. Now, in today's day and age, there is always CPUs, right? Branch doesn't do everything. They will collect the cash for opening the account, the initial deposit, whatever, 500, 5,000, and they will collect all the documents, sign forms and everything. When they are accepting this cash, obviously right now the account is not open, so you cannot put those 5,000 account in the customer's account. You have to park again somewhere. Because you have to reflect the cash in your books, right? So you will debit the cash account and you will credit sundry as suspense account for CPC, so that you are transferring this 5,000 money to the CPC for taking the final decision. Now these documents goes to the CPC. They will verify everything and all of that. If documents are in place, KYC due diligence done, all okay, then they will authorize the opening of account, which means they will transfer this money back to the customer's account. I mean, there can be the further segregation. I mean, they will give it to the SLFIT account of the branch, and from SLFIT account of the branch, it can go to the customer's account or whatever the arrangements can be. So that is how the money will get routed through. Now, if assume there is a rejection of the form, again, a bank cannot hold that money with them, right? They have to return to the customer by giving an explanation saying that why we cannot open your account. So the money will go back to SLFIT. Branch will have to ensure that they reach out to the customer, return their money, and clear that particular balance from that particular account. Now, this was an example where there will be obviously some or the balance will keep on getting reflected, SLFIT account. But if you look at the sundry account where I'm transferring money to CPC, now whatever my branch timings are, let's say 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, I'll collect all the cash. But before I close my day end, I can easily transfer that money to the CPC account, correct? I mean, I will load that particular transaction in the queue of CPC. So this account is zeroized. Now, if you're trying to close the branch books, and if this particular account has some money, it will not let you. So this is the checks and controls to make sure that all the money which you have received from the customers for opening the account, you are giving it to the CPC. So that's why a check called as an EOD check. Whatever the other accounts, as I said earlier, at the end of the day, this is all customer money. So you have to have a GL justification which clearly identifies which customer it belongs to. If you're unable to identify at a particular point of time, then you have those timing 7 days, 10 days, and then the escalations goes up. All the entire process gets followed up. Let's look at the extreme scenario, right? Excess cash. I mean, somebody, while depositing the cash, instead of 1,000 rupees, they gave 1,100. So there was 100 rupees extra cash at the end of the day. You're not able to figure out which customer was this for whatever reason. What happens to that money? Can bank keep it? Obviously, no. Correct. There are RBI regulations which guide saying that you have to ultimately transfer this money to RBI DEF account. There are some timelines around it. So for 3 years, you can keep it in the branch, then it goes to centralized team, and from there it goes finally to RBI after, if I'm not wrong, 7 years or 9 years. So that's how on your excess cash things work. Short cash, as I said, you can recover it from your employee as well. That depends on the bank's policy and all that thing. But ultimately, whatever is your sundry asset account, you have to provide for as well. If you're not able to recover particular money from a particular client for whatever reason, then you have to provide for. So even sundry account, other balances needs provisioning. So provisioning is important for pointing as well as non-pointing. Now, again, why this feature I'm trying to link here? In pointing account, as I said, you're reversing a particular entry. So at any point of time, you exactly know from which day this particular balance is outstanding. So on, let's say 30th of January, in our example, I reverse the entry for 5th of January. So that 100 rupee balance is outstanding for 26 days from 4th of January. That's the added advantage for a pointing account. Whereas in non-pointing, you have to keep all this records and everything manually. So you are able to identify since how long this balance is and do provisioning accordingly. RBI circular also highlighted immediate audit of this entire office account piece, and it also mandates periodic review, concurrent audit sort of a review for the entire office account. Board audit committee reporting is also important. You got to report your sundry suspense account balance findings of the audit report on a periodic basis to the audit committee. So that's the high level synopsis of RBI circular. Now I'll just build over to what we discussed, and I'm a little conscious of time as well because I want to cover on the last slide of the audit approach. So I'll build over, as I said, to our earlier discussion. There are primary three elements of this entire office account. First is system architecture. Second is your entire transaction posting, day and processing and monitoring. And the third is reporting and provisioning. Three elements which we could clearly distinguish. Now, in the system architecture, there are two important elements. First is master and user creation. Obviously, you got to have admin rights who will assign roles and responsibilities, etc., to individual users and roles. So that's the admin rights. You you will have accesses according to your department. So treasury department would have their own accesses, branch would have their own accesses, trade finance would have their own accesses. So that is how your role gets defined for each type of activity you are trying to perform. Your roles will be defined accordingly. You have posting rights as well, one important element. As a branch user, I need not have an posting rights in treasury accounts, right? So that is how you define your posting rights. As a treasury users, even though you are a centralized treasury function, but you need not have a posting right to each and every account of a branch. So that's where posting rights comes into play. The third element in this, the transaction limits. I mean, I would tend to believe other than banking, there would be two types of transactions which would happen in books of accounts. One is transfer and one is cash. Correct? You post any entry in books of accounts in any sector. Either you are transferring balance from one account to other by doing an entry, or you are doing a cash entry. But in bank, we have third element of clearing. And for each of this, there would be a limit. Now, cash limit, transfer limit, and clearing limit, as I said. And again, each and every account would have their own limits, which means, let's say as an individual user, I have a cash limit of, because I'm a teller, I have a cash limit of whatever, 50 lakhs, 1 crore, 2 crore to post an entry, 50 crore, depending on my level as a branch user. I mean, obviously, in a branch, there would be a probationary officer, there would be level 1, level 2, and like that till branch manager, and everyone would have a higher powers to post entries or different powers to post entries, right? Even though as a tailor, I have a limit of whatever amount, but SA stamp as an account, you cannot post an entry of more than 10,000. So again, so always an entry would get posted, which is lower of your own limit as a user and your account as a limit. That's the transaction posting. How does that happen in the system? Core banking system as an application, as I said, there are menus and MOP IDs, whatever you call, through which you post an entry. We just took an example of cash deposit. There's no manual entry which is getting posted, right? Like Percy account debit to cash or cash account debit to Rahul account. This is automatically happen when you book a transaction. So these are the direct entries which gets generated through when you book a transaction. Other than that, also you may sometime require to post a manual entry where you are manually selecting a debit account and manually selecting a credit account. So that's where you will have another menu to post those entries from the system standpoint I'm talking. users assigned with, I mean, whenever we go to assign a particular role to a user, there should be an HOD approval in place before you assign a role to that individual. I think office account, GL accounts and attributes, I covered most of them. I'll just pick one of them again. Other system controls, which is one like freeze account. And I'll go back to our example on CPC account, right? So branch collected the cash account debit to CPC account, and then they are transferring that money to that CPC unit, CPU unit, right? For opening an account. Now, if you look at it, in this particular account, you can easily freeze the debit posting for branch users so that branch cannot take the money back. They can only put a credit entry. Similarly, you can restrict CPU users from posting a credit entry in this account because they are not going to receive the money to open an account, right? At the end of the day, it's from the branch only the money can comes in. So you can put additional controls by freezing the account on one side, either on a debit side or on the credit side. EOD checks we spoke, transaction posting I think we spoke. Okay, end of day I'll just take one more example. Let's say you close your branch at 5 o'clock, and we took an example of an account where the money came from the treasury to the branch, and then branch is ultimately giving it back to the customer. That account is a zero-wise account. You have closed your branch, and what happens while closing also, let me just add one line. You have to close all your branches first, close your departments, and then you will ultimately close at a bank level at the end of the day, and your trial balance will get generated for that particular day. Now you have closed the branch, but your treasury is open, and I suddenly received from my RBI account money which has to be transferred to a branch. So treasury is still open, so treasury transfer that money to branch. Now that money, branch is already closed, but that money is now sitting somewhere between either the central department or the branch. So when the closing would happen at a bank level, system would recognize this entry, and it will park that money in the proxy account of that branch, because again, it has to close at the end of the day. So money is lying in the proxy account of that branch, and on the next day, branch needs to ensure that proxy account get cleared in day one, and they will transfer it back to the customer account. So that's where the proxy account thing comes into play. Account monitoring and classification, I think I'll pick up on the classification side. So we discussed certain attributes, right? System only account, pointing account, cash account, non-cash account, intersole account. Depending on these attributes, the classification of the office account should happen, and not on the value is what we believe, because let's say a capital account or a bond account, it has huge money, but it is properly restricted. Only treasury function or the finance and account function can post entries in those accounts. So there is no worry, even though there's a huge balance sitting in that particular account. But what matters is the features. If you have a cash manual account, obviously you got to prioritize it more and put it under the very high risk account. Maybe if it's a pointing account, then it is slightly lower, so high risk. If it's a full system account, then it's a low risk account, right? I mean, nobody will be posting those manual entries. So you got to, from your transaction monitoring perspective, you just need to ensure that system account continues to be system and there are no manual entries. If you just generate one alert, if there is a manual entry and it gets picked up, that is more than enough for those system accounts, if from your monitoring standpoint, right? Reporting and provision, I think we touched upon when we were speaking on the other aspects. Provisioning for pointing, non-pointing, we spoke. Quarterly attestation of the balances across all departments. I mean, departments can give a confirmation that this is the balance outstanding, this is the GL justification, so that there is some sort of a confirmation from the HOD side saying that this balance is appropriate and we have a proper GL justification. And reporting, we spoke to the audit committee. Before I jump to the last slide, just a quick time check. Okay, Percy, you want to continue? I'll just spend 5 minutes and then we'll pick up the questions.
Rahul, please continue. No problem.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I'll try and connect all the topics which we discussed in the above slides. Okay, so the first and till now we spoke only on the core banking application, if you would have realized. But banks are banks and they have multiple systems. For trade finance, there is a system. For treasury, there is a system. For consolidating books of accounts, there is Oracle or another system, right? So there's so many, so and so forth. Now, everything gets consolidated at one level, and you generate a trial balance across all systems put together, and they have to be in sync. So hence, understanding of the systems and subsystems, what is the structure of the office account? See, from the annual report or from the shareholders perspective, you finally see there are 15 or 20 line items in the balance sheet, right? At a very high level: fixed asset, current investment, long-term investments. So everything is grouping up in some logical or the other manner, correct? Now, hence the all subsystems having the similar language is very important when you are consolidating the books of accounts. As a first step, you really need to understand what are the systems, subsystems, what is the structure of the account, and how the ultimate consolidation is happening. Evaluate the office account lifecycle as a second step. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, office account lifecycle would mean opening, posting of entries, modification, monitoring, transaction monitoring, balance monitoring, provisioning, and closing of the accounts. So the entire life cycle, what are the checks and balances, controls during the audit, we need to understand from a control standpoint, the design of the control is appropriate or not. There would be various reconciliation. One example I just touched during one of the previous example was the cash reconciliation, right? At the end of the day, you're reconciling, hence you're identifying that there's a difference between a book cash and a physical cash. There are various reconciliations which would happen in our entire across various products. Now, when we touched upon the subsystems and the system topic as well, from the subsystems, the balance is going to the main system for consolidation. Even that reconciliation has to happen. Otherwise, your subsystem has a different balance and you're consolidating something else. So even that reconciliation review is important. Risk assessment office account, we briefly touched. This will help us where should our effort be focused on at the end of the day. So that's where the assessment is critical. Last two steps, if I have to just quickly touch upon, is the defining or updating the rules for data analytics. As I said, one of the element was to do the periodic review of the office account. Now, from that perspective, if you look at it, we got to build some rules across each of these office account to generate alerts, identify exceptions, discuss them with the process owners or the account owner rather, understand why this happened, what is the reason, and you know, take necessary actions. In this entire process, when you are starting off this, you will have many false positive at the beginning. You will have to continue to refine your mechanism to make sure that you are identifying the right exceptions and your efforts are focused in the right direction. Whenever you identify any exception, you will obviously have an opportunity to improve. We got to conduct a root cause analysis to identify what happened when we are discussing those clarifications with the account owners, and obviously augment the entire process and monitoring framework. So one of the speaker also did mention 3 lines of defense during our today's sessions. I'm sure banks would have their own mechanism to review the alerts and you know, periodically monitor the entire framework and monitor the entire books of accounts, office account piece rather. So we being a third line of defense, we are also trying to identify those exceptions, and we got to ultimately align with the the monitoring framework or the monitoring team of the bank, and see if the alerts which we have generated can get built part of the monitoring mechanism of the bank itself, and to augment their framework. So that's briefly what I had. I think I touched upon at a high level most of the aspects, but I do hope that people could appreciate and understand what I had to cover. I'll just take 30 more seconds, Percy, before I hand it over to you for questions. I started off with explaining the overall gravity of the subject, the number of office accounts, complexity of office account, Then I have moved on to the overall system elements, the attributes of the accounts, how the consolidation happens across subsystems and all of that. We also touched upon account opening, modification, the monitoring is critical, generation of the alert. Let me give one more example in terms of the alert mechanism, right? Let's pick an account of excess cash. So from excess cash, the money would go. I mean, somebody has given you extra money, correct? When he was depositing the cash with you, instead of 1,000, he gave you 1,100. And hence your physical cash is more. So you're parking that money. So from such account, short cash or excess cash accounts, the money cannot go to an employee account. So that's one of the rule, as simple as that. So that's how you got to build those rules, monitor, and continue to do your audit. So that's where I would like to end. I just wanted to summarize. Over to you, Percy, for any questions.
Thanks, thanks, Rahul, for sharing your perspectives on this very interesting topic of inter-office accounts, and even sharing practical tips on how to manage audits for this topic. So we have about a couple of questions which I
Sure.
will share with you, and yeah, so the first question is, since the management is responsible for designing the framework, why can't they make the system so robust that there is no chance of misuse by any of the branches or the users?
Okay. Yeah, I wish so as well. I think we got to realize first thing that systems have been in place for a very long time, correct? As a bank, we have evolved. So many processes have got centralized. So many new products which have come into place. So you can't just revisit your whole system and give very limited rights to the branches and make it very robust so that there is no question of misusing of this office account. Yes, ideal state is that obviously you will take baby steps to reach that stage. You got to constantly see what is happening, monitor the entire office account to identify, as I said, the last step is on the root cause analysis and augmenting the whole framework. But yeah, I mean, if I have to really answer it very bluntly, it's not that straightforward, and you cannot put everything in place to make sure that there are no misuses of office account. That's why maybe RBI also looks at this particular topic with very very broad lens, and to make sure that banks have put in place proper processes and frameworks to avoid such misuses. But it is an evolving aspect, and hence you got to continue to monitor is what I would like to answer as.
Yeah, absolutely. And also we cannot stop business just to, put controls in place. So it's very essential that, business continues as it is. That's very important. And also the control aspects to it. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So the next question is, can you please share some of the tools which can be used for DA and review of office accounts? So from your experience, if you share some tools, that would be great.
So I think all the available, I mean, maybe I didn't get the question properly, but all available tools can be utilized, ACL, be it your SAS or whatever. See, you got to understand the volume of this office account, right? I mean, let's imagine a credit card transaction, credit card payment account. So in this account, every customer can either pay by cash, check, online transfers. So everything is getting hit, and so many customers again. So the volume is huge. So what we actually did at one of the bank, if I pulled out a dump from the system by giving a codes which ensure that entries other than this 3 accounts, please give it to me. So on the credit side, if these 3 accounts are there, you ignore them. You give me other than this 3 account, because you're dealing with a very huge volume. So if you download the whole dump, first of all, it will take its own time and ages to get the dump, and then run those queries to identify the exception. You can also do it this way. Generate the dump which helps you identify the exceptions. But from the tool perspective, I think this topic is not different from any other analysis. Whatever audit area you do, and whatever any other audits where you want to deploy data analytics tools, all those tools can be used here as well. There's no specific requirement, or I mean specific tool related stuff.
Okay. So the next one is, when there are many subsystems, how is it possible to integrate all of them and keep all the attributes of office accounts in sync?
Okay, very interesting question. See, let's look at it from subsystems perspective. You have one system to just for your microfinance business, correct? There you will have very limited menus where the and possibility of not posting any manual entries also. Your systems may not allow that. So you will have specific menus which are designed in which either you will disburse the loans, you will recollect, you will book your transaction of collection of the EMIs and all of that. And these entries will get hit and it will go to the main system. What you need to ensure, see, a particular cash account, let's say loan repayment for core banking system. If I've disbursed the loan from my CBS itself, which is Finacle or FlexCube or whatever it is, vis-a-vis from my subsystems, it may not require matching of the attributes across each of them. Why? Because your systems are different and your system functionalities are different. All the functionality which are available in your CBS might not be there in your other systems. What you need to ensure, the controls which are required from that subsystem perspective are in place. So for example, that microfinance system is used by only 5-6 people in the centralized function and rest by the branches. Now in the branches, you got to make sure whatever accounts are there, you will give rights only to those accounts which are required by the branch, so that there is no additional entry which gets posted. For those 5-6 people who also, you will not give them the rights to post accounts to the branches accounts, so that again the chances of getting any unwanted entry is restricted. So depending on each of the system, you got to ensure that right controls are in place. Attribute is just one way to control, and it may not be available in all your systems. It will be available only in few systems. I mean, core banking systems.
Okay. The next one is, for an SCB, what is the appropriate number of office accounts to have?
For an
SCB.
SCB, a scheduled commercial bank. Okay.
Yeah.
I said, I think I answered at the beginning. I was expecting this question to anyways come. See, again, as I said, you will define specific purpose account to make sure that you are able to monitor the accounts very carefully. And that's a trade-off between having a general account and a specific purpose account, to what extent you want to go. So I may not be able to point finger and say that exactly these many number of accounts are there, but from your master replication perspective, if I really largely think 100-150 accounts to replicate for each branch should be more than enough. What do you need at the end of the day? Let's assume that in a rural branch, you may not require Forex accounts, right? Even if you're opening, you should ensure that you are disabling those accounts so that there are no unwarranted entries getting posted from the rural branch in those Forex accounts. So as I said, 150-200 accounts per branch to replicate. You need cash account, you need standard CPC accounts, as I said, your CASA accounts, your loan accounts. There's just basic accounts you need, right? So you got to replicate them only to avoid the unnecessary blow up of the number of the office accounts.
Okay. So I think we have maybe one more question. Is system only account better control or pointing account control?
Very good question. Very good question. Interesting as well. Let's segregate between two first. What are the system accounts? As I said, income accounts, there is no manual entries required. But if you want an account where you got to post manual entries, you don't have a choice. Short cash, excess cash, you have to put a manual entry, right? You cannot make them as a system. I mean, ideally, yes, you would want all your accounts to be system, but that is not practically possible, that you will identify what is a value, and then you will system will automatically post entries. That's not possible. So system accounts and pointing accounts have to be considered slightly differently. Okay, system account can never be a pointing, correct? Because system is not going to think which entry to be reversed. System is just going to dump the entry. In your manual account, you should try and implement pointing as a feature. So both are different, but by default, if somebody has to put a finger on, system account is obviously the best. But you cannot avoid not having a manual account, and hence the point of and the attribute of pointing account comes into play.
Okay. So the next one is, can branch users with zero posting powers allowed to do transactions in line with RBI guidelines, and what are the effects of such cases?
Okay. I would believe zero posting right. I mean, you have inquiry role, you have transaction posting role, correct? In a banking system, if like as an auditor, we'll have an inquiry role. We never be able to post transactions. So first, I think if I understand this clearly, inquiry role है तो posting होगा ही नहीं. So there is no question of doing any posting. Zero limit posting, I'm still not able to figure out. Maybe I will just park this. I'll make this as a note and I'll come back. But obviously by default, see, one of the RBI point was very clear. Only authorized individuals should post the entries. So I think that answers. I mean, if he is not supposed to, he's not supposed to. But zero limit, I think, let me figure this out.
Sure.
The better control would be inquiry access right rather than a posting right.
Okay. So the next one is for prepaid card business, we have settlement accounts. Whether these settlement accounts would come under the purview of office accounts.
Okay, let me take this as a question, not from a specific prepaid card system. If the question, and let me rephrase the question, will all my accounts be considered as office accounts? There is always a debate which happens whenever we speak to the client. I mean, sundry assets and sundry suspense, sundry asset and sundry liability only should be considered as a office account, inter-office account, or how it is. I mean, avoiding to answer whether what it is not. I think better is to cover at the larger scope wherever there is a gray area. I mean, if you can post manual entries in certain accounts and you can park balances on a temporary basis in certain accounts, it will automatically become an office account, right? So I think what purpose the account is utilized or used for whether it is for temporary parking or those sort of nature, definitely should get covered in our review. I would answer that way.
Okay, thank you. So the next one is, I think in the interest of time, we will take this as the last question.
Sure.
So would an SAP ERP financials like office account system be used in medium to large entities to cover IO accounts, main as well as branch accounts, offices, sorry, but would require customization? Also, this kind of system will have wide audit trails in place, which can be further connected to central monitoring systems. Do you want me to repeat the question?
I will shorten this question in one liner, what I could understood. Can SAP Oracle be used as a core banking system? Yeah, I mean, I'm not expert in SAP Oracle, but whatever I understand, I think I would like to believe your Finacle, FlexCubes, and TCS banks cannot be replaced. If you go to run banking, there are so many MOP IDs, right? I mean, menus which I was talking about for cash deposit, cash acceptance, for opening of an account, for LC, BG. I mean, you got to completely change your. I do understand Oracle a bit. SAP is primarily used on the manufacturing side, but whatever I understand Oracle, there are specific modules for fixed asset, for HR, for your income booking, etc. So it's more for a service industry. Obviously, banking overall comes under the umbrella of service industry, but it's very. I mean, if you're doing a transaction advisory or for an investment banking, those places, I would like to believe that Oracle is a good fit. But from the banking standpoint, it may not be. And let me explicitly say that this is my personal view. Whatever I understand from the Oracle as a system and what are the needs of a core banking application system.
Thank you. So participants, now the platform will be available for 15 days to view these sessions in case you have missed any of them or would like to view them again. Also, do stay tuned in after the vote of thanks for the leaderboard results. So now I would like to hand over to Nikhil Bagaidkar from IDFC Bank, who has helped us to conceptualize this program and to conduct the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, Percy. Thanks a lot. So, it was really a wonderful 2 days at this IIM Bombay Banking Audit Conclave. I mean, it was a great idea and thought that we should do something exclusively for the bank auditors, and because typically there is a huge amount of the bank audit teams across the industry today, both in private and public sector banking, who are looking for something which is very exclusive and typical for their industry, and increase their collective knowledge. I would also like to thank the chapter, the current president, Akhilesh Thakur, the managing committee, and the whole of the BOG to give this particular type of event a shot. Special thanks to all the knowledgeable speakers who agreed to take out their valuable time and share their valuable knowledge with all of us who attended this conclave. Extremely grateful to our sponsors, Baker Tilly, to have agreed to sponsor this event. A word of appreciation is in order for the moderators, Akhilesh and Percy, who always enthrall us with their great smiling kind of appeal, and ensure that the sessions are conducted in a timely and an effective manner. Thanks to the II staff, Kritika, Menas, and also the event management team of Sanil, Randeep Pawar, and others who spent a lot of time in even before this conclave to ensure that everything works in order, and during the conclave to ensure that it gets delivered in a seamless fashion. And last but not the least, to all you participants, I think it is a great kind of satisfaction that so many of the people actually displayed interest in attending and increasing and the learning opportunities. And it also gives a lot of encouragement to organize more such events. And this kind of remarkable display of enthusiasm is really helpful from an overall II community standpoint to organize more such events. So thanks. You are all very important to ensure that this event was a great success. So overall, I think I'm quite happy and proud to see that this event has turned out very successful. Thanks, Percy.
Thank you, Nikhil. And now we have the leaderboard results, which all of us have been waiting for very eagerly. So as I read it out, at the top score, we have Mr. Suresh Srinivasan. He's from IDFC Bank, First Bank. So congratulations, Suresh. You will receive a voucher for 3,000 rupees. The second person on the leaderboard who wins it is Mr. Ayush Goel, and he is from ICICI Bank. So congratulations, Ayush, and you will receive a gift voucher for 2,000 rupees. Unfortunately, the third place goes to me, but no, it will go to the fourth person who has been active on this platform, and this is Mr. Uttam Bhartiya. He's from Utkarsh Bank, and I would like to congratulate all of you for this taking this initiative, taking the time out to attend the sessions, and give your feedback about the platform, about the speakers, and how you felt during these 2 days. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time.